Hello everyone, Francis Walsh here again with thedigitalmerchant.com, and today we're going to be discussing selling an agency business. So if you're at the head of a creative agency and you've been doing it for a while and you think now is the time to sell, great, that's a cause for congratulations, and you're close to a big milestone in your career, but it's important to make sure you get the most out of your sale and that you really commit to doing it properly, getting an appropriate price, making sure your mindset's in the right place as you sell. And there's an awful lot to all of this, and so that's why I decided to make this video and talk you through some of the key steps involved. So my first key piece of advice here is to make your decision and stick to it. If you're at the point where you have kind of a vague notion that you might like to sell but you're not 100% sure yet, I'd really recommend figuring that out first in your head. So sit down, consider all the relevant factors, think about what price you'd be willing to accept and what price you won't go below, and think about all the broader implications that this will have in your life. So not just in your working life, but in your family life, in your social life, etc. And once you've weighed up all the variables and all the considerations, make your decision and just let that be your decision and don't look back, because selling a business takes a lot of emotional fortitude. And it also takes quite a lot of commitment. You'll have to be involved in the process quite heavily for, a number of months, maybe up to a year. And you're going to have the emotional strength to know when to make the right decisions at the right times. So for that reason, it's really just important to have a solid mindset going into it, that that this is what you want to do and that why you want to do it as well. So the next step then, after you've made the final decision that you want to sell, is to set your goals. And now I referred to, I suppose, the key goal just a minute ago, which was your sale price and the amount of money you'd be willing to accept. And that's obviously probably the main goal that you're going to be thinking about, but it's by no means the only one. So another factor to consider is whether you want to sell, in all cash or via an earnout system. And an earnout system pays you some of the money up front and a portion of the money then at later dates, pending certain targets being hit by the new owner. So obviously the all cash structure is better for you as a seller, all things being equal. But the reality is that you can probably get a much better sale price if you agree to some form of earnout system. So I suppose this really is a question of risk tolerance, and it's a question of how badly you need the full sum of money or how soon you need it. So this is obviously something you need to sit down and consider yourself in some detail. One other goal I think it's important to keep in mind is whether you're open to doing a transition period after you sell, or how long you might envisage that transition period being. With creative agencies, these do tend to be common because obviously leaders put quite a bit of themselves into agencies and they're quite tied up in the operations typically, which means it's much easier for a buyer to take all this over if there is a period after the sale in which the original owner is still there and still helping out and still getting everything transferred and stuff. So that's going to make the sale a more kind of better prospect for buyers if you're open to doing a transition period, but obviously this might be something you want to limit. So again, this is something you have to sit down and consider in some detail while you're still getting ready to sell. So step 3 then is where the rubber meets the road, I suppose. It's time to get a valuation for your business to see how much it's worth and how much it's likely to sell for. So I go into some detail on valuation methods here, but I think it's important to stress that really my advice here is to let a broker do this for you. A lot of reputable brokerages actually offer valuations for free, so there's really no risk for you in going down this path, and it really is best to let an expert handle it for you. In terms of the actual valuations, if you do want to get a rough idea by doing your own math, value is primarily based on a multiple of your earnings. So there are a couple of ways you can measure earnings. For smaller agencies, usually you will use what's called seller's discretionary earnings. So this is your net profit plus any perks or salary you'll pay yourself. Larger agencies then with bigger teams and systems typically use EBITDA or EBITDA, and that stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization. And then in terms of the multiple you'll use, this does vary quite a bit, but it'll usually be somewhere in the 2 to 5x earnings range. Then the next step then, and this might be obvious, but you'll need to get all your financials and other important documents in order so that they're ready to present to prospective buyers. So broadly, this is going to include things like financial statements, evidence of your bookkeeping practices, legal documents and contracts, documents detailing your standard operating procedures, and a confidential information memorandum, or CIM. So this is essentially just a prospectus that has a lot of your business's confidential information in it that prospective buyers are going to need to know. And if you work with a broker, they will generally generate this for you. The next step then is to try and boost your agency's value before the sale. And now this might seem obvious, that this is obviously what you're trying to do in business all the time, is to maximize your company's value, but there are maybe some low-hanging fruit that you could potentially exploit in the months leading up to your sale. So things like reducing owner dependency, so kind of delegating stuff to your account managers and your support team, diversifying and solidifying your revenue streams, whether that's through different clients or different traffic sources or anything else like that. Positioning yourself carefully in terms of your marketing to your niche. So if you're kind of coming across as a bit of a generalist agency, even though you do have a kind of a specialty, it's good to make sure that that's coming across in your public facing materials. And then also any short-term growth that you can potentially drive in the last few months before you make your sale. So whether that's pitching extra work to existing clients or trying to take on a few extra clients that you think might be in your pipeline. Little things like that, if you can just get your numbers up before you sell, it will really improve your multiple and essentially improve the amount of money you're going to walk away with. The next step is to decide how you're going to sell your business in terms of the platform you're going to use. And there are three kind of broad options here. So number one is to use a broker. Number two is to go with the buy and sell marketplace. And number three is to just do it yourself. And number one is the one I'm really going to be recommending for most businesses, particularly those that are valued at 100K or above, really. I just think you can't beat the level of specialist service and support that a broker provides when it comes to things like valuation and pitching your company to potential buyers, escrow, all of these kinds of tasks that you're probably not that familiar with. It's just really helpful to have an expert in place to help you with them and to kind of execute them on your behalf. If you're dealing with a lower value company, you can sometimes get value from buy and sell marketplaces. So the likes of Flippa and BizBuySell, it's possible to do good business there, but it's just important to realise that you're going to be left with a lot of the vetting yourself, and you'll have to do an awful lot more legwork than if you went with a broker. So for a more valuable business, I really wouldn't recommend going down this route, but if you do have something in the lower 5-figure range, it can work. And then for DIY sales, I really would try to avoid these unless you have quite a good idea who you're going to be selling to. Whether that be a competitor or someone you know or whatever else it is. If you're going to try and pitch your company yourself without using a job or without using a company's board or without using a broker, it's just going to be really time consuming and probably ineffective. So yeah, best avoid it except in specific cases. So next we're going to talk about brokers and kind of make some recommendations as to what brokers you should consider if you're looking at selling your agency. And the first one we're looking at here is my ultimate recommendation. Actually, I think it's probably the best broker in this area. It's Quiet Light. So Quiet Light specializes in the kind of 100K to $25 million valuation range. So it serves pretty broadly all those kind of mid-market companies that would fall into that bracket. All of its agents have either bought or sold a business themselves in the past. So, they really know the ins and outs of this and what your pain points are as a seller and how to get the most value out of your deal. And they provide a really high touch service when it comes to just customer support and keeping you involved in the process throughout. And so for that reason, I just think they provide a really high value service, and they have a really high success rate when it comes to sales as well. So yeah, I'm just a really big fan of everything they do, and I think they provide great service to businesses looking to sell that are in that kind of mid-market bracket. If your agency is in the larger cap sector, so maybe a valuation of above 25 million, well into that 8-figure range, it's worth considering FE International. So this again is another broker that provides really high level service, but it does cater to a kind of a larger cap segment of the market than Quiet Light. It's quite closed off in its operations in comparison to Quiet Light. There's not that much transparency into the buy and sell process, like as you will get with Quiet Light. It kind of just, the agents do pretty much do their own thing and just let you know when they need you, more or less. And also, you don't get a dedicated broker in the way you will with Quiet Light. Like, your case will be handled on a teams basis, so you'll have someone doing your onboarding, someone else doing the pitching to potential buyers, and then someone else taking you through the closing phase of the sale as well. So if that's, I mean, I personally think it is better to have a single point of contact just for trust and convenience. But if this all isn't something that, you think is a big priority to you, or if your business is in that really high value segment of the market and you want, a team that has a lot of experience in that area, then FE International is definitely worth a look. And so lastly then, we're going to look at Empire Flippers. Now, Empire Flippers really is more of a buy and sell marketplace than a true broker. But I suppose it's kind of a hybrid really, in that it does offer some of the services that you can kind of associate with brokerage. So the likes of vetting, it's quite thorough with vetting, so you're not going to be dealing with a lot of tire kickers and unserious buyers in the way that you will if you list on a kind of a large scale buy and sell marketplace like Flippa. Personally, I think unless maybe your business is a lower value sale, I would probably still go with the brokerage. I just think they represent better value for money, particularly because Empire Flippers doesn't actually work out that cheap. It actually can charge as much as 15% commission on some sales, on some kind of lower value sales, which is high enough in the market. So unless you're kind of below that 100k level where maybe brokers aren't interested in dealing with you, I would just go with the brokerage instead. And so at this point, once you've decided what channel you're going to use to sell your business, it's kind of time to get into the brass tacks of actually doing so. Now, this section really is geared more towards people who decide to go with a DIY sale or selling on a marketplace. Most of the tasks I'm going to discuss here will be taken care of by your broker if you do decide to go with brokerage. But this is just things like crafting a listing and a prospectus, which you can disseminate to potential buyers. And then subsequently fielding interest and inquiries. And this bit is kind of interesting because it will massively depend on the volume of inquiries you're getting. So depending on the type of listing you have and your pricing strategy, etc., you could be inundated with offers, or you might only get, it could be crickets for weeks at a time. So I suppose it's about getting a strategy together early to kind of deal with this, these contacts, and to kind of decide who's worth taking a call with and who isn't, just so your time isn't wasted by unserious buyers, but so that you're moving positively towards sale agreed at the same time. And then once you get to the stage of receiving an offer, these will come in the form of a letter of intent or LOI, and these essentially set out the terms of the sale. They're not generally binding in the way that a contract is, but typically you won't sign an LOI and then still have your business on the market. So if your deal falls down at the LOI stage, it can really hamper stuff. So you do need to make sure that once you get to that stage, that everything is locked down, everything is agreed properly, and that you're pretty much ready to hand over the business at that point. Again, these are all things that a brokerage will take care of on your behalf if you decide to work with a brokerage. So this is one of the reasons why I do recommend going down that route, especially if you have a higher value business. It just makes all these tricky little tasks that are an unfortunate part of the sales process, it just makes them easier, and it just means you don't have to worry about them. So again, that's really my recommendation here is, if you can, to go with the brokerage. Then once you have your letter of intent in place, the last step on the ladder is to just get through due diligence. And so this is actually quite a nerve-wracking part of the process. It's where the buyer will inspect, all the various details of your operations and your financials to make sure they're getting what they're paying for, essentially. And so it's good for you as a seller to be prepared well in advance at this stage. Have all your documents ready to go, be ready to answer any questions you think might come up from the buyer, and all that kind of thing, just to make sure, everything goes smoothly. Because it can happen that sales fall apart at the due diligence stage just because of some form of sloppiness, which obviously no one wants to happen. So ultimately, I think the take home from this is that there's no one size fits all when it comes to sales. Every agency is different, every owner is different, every buyer is different, and there's just a lot of, nitty gritty to be worked out in these situations. So I suppose, again, just closing off, and I know I've said this a couple of times, I would really recommend going with a broker. I just think they make things so much easier, so much more efficient from a business standpoint. But yeah, best of luck to anyone who is in the process of selling their business at the moment. I know it's a long road and it can be quite stressful, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, that's all from me in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.